while it feels like such a tranquil moment in time right now, I almost hate to disrupt it, and yet at the same time, I am extremely exuberant about the third of the 4-week series. The first week we talked about the thing itself, and last week the way it works. This week what it does, and next week how to use it. I find that this teaching is ever transformative, transforming, as Sandy talked about, and use of the imagination, as Frank talked about, and many of the ideas Frank talked about he's going to hear over and over again. Not the imagination part so much, but we use that to get there. But the ideas of science of mind keep coming and keep playing over, and every time you read a new quote, you're in a new place. So you get something more from it. This isn't a science of mind quote, but I bet most of us have heard this quote or something like this. Be the kind of person that attracts the kind of people you want in your life. Have you heard that one before? And so what it's talking about is the idea that if we want to attract someone or a group or a neighbor, a significant other, or even a friend into our life, we need to be the kind of person that that person would be attracted to, so that we are attracting them. And that's principle. That's what it does, and that's what we're talking about. Ernest Holmes wrote, "Never expect to derive any benefit from science of mind that its principle does not contain." So yes, we are immersed in infinite intelligence, but we are only able to experience that which we are able and willing to receive. We are an outlet for the ideas of the divine. We draw from life that which we channel through our own mind. That's why we each have different experiences. We all think differently. We each want something different. We each feel differently. Even presented with the same experience, we often hear parents say, "I don't know why this one turned out like this and this one like this, because I raised them both the same." Doesn't matter. They aren't yours. They are unique individuals. And so are each of us. So we're having different experiences. However, we derive our greatest benefits as we establish a consciousness, a conscious connection with unity. As we establish first and foremost our personal relationship with the God that is. And then we're able to know, I am that. Spirit has already imparted of itself. It is for us to think and feel accordingly to our truest desires in order to attract that which we want, that which we love, that which we desire. Holmes wrote in this section, we can know God only insofar as we become God. And then interestingly, he countered himself because he said, well, we know we can't actually become God. He suggests that we look at this statement figuratively and not literally, because although we can't become God, since God is all that is, and we as an individual cannot become all that is, God does personify through each one of us. So each one of us is a divine spark in the infinite flame that God is.
Holmes' first sentence in this chapter, I think, sets the stage for basically the whole first 4 chapters of the book and the ideas that he's trying to get across. And he says, we should approach the study of this science rationally. And he goes on, but I think that's a good place to stop right there. he says we should approach the study of this science. He doesn't say religion or spiritual philosophy. He says this science. We should study this science rationally. And of course, if it is indeed a science, we would be looking at it rationally and logically, and looking for reality in it, rather than superstition, of course. I think that he is setting the stage through all these chapters here in the beginning of the textbook by telling us that this is not a religious study. This is a scientific study. It's based on scientific principle. It's based on principle, not just simple hopes and beliefs. The founder religions are based on powerful figures throughout history who have done miraculous things. Of course, we know about the miracles of Jesus. You know, he turned water into wine, and he walked on the water, and he raised people from the dead, and so on. Muhammad sat on a rock and spoke to God, or heard the voice of God, and then wrote that all down in the Quran and started his religion. Buddha sat under a Bodhi tree and was enlightened. Zoroaster stood on the side of a mountain and talked to God and created Zoroastrianism. Moses spoke to a burning bush on the side of a mountain. And of course, Sandy went to a mountain. We wouldn't consider that as necessarily a miracle as much as a place where she could go within herself and find her truth. And so we find that miraculous things happen to all these spiritual leaders. They seem to be bigger than life, bigger than we are, and they seem to do things that ordinarily humans supposedly cannot achieve.
Oh, we can.
Yes, we can. My fear is that that automatically sets limits to humanity. And if we are one with the one, we have no limits. Because we are one with the source of all that is, we are limitless. I believe that miracle stories describe supernatural activity, not spiritual principle. I'll say that again because I think it's an important thought. Miracle stories describe supernatural activity, not spiritual principle. And Science of Mind is all about studying spiritual principle. Approaching rationally allows us to know that what it does, what God does, it does for us, through us, and as us as easily as it does for others, even if they be great spiritual icons from the past. It doesn't do, or it didn't do differently for them than it does for us in the here and now. Ernest Holmes says, there is no hocus pocus in a mental treatment. It is always definite, conscious, concrete, and explicit. We are dealing with intelligence and should deal with it intelligently. We should deal with it rationally and logically. I believe that depending on deities to do the impossible for us does not imbue confidence and conviction in our own capabilities. It manipulates us into dependence upon religion. What we should be experiencing is inspiration and enlightenment, encouraging us to know that we are one with the infinite power of the universe, and we can use it for our own good, personally, in the here and now.
Absolutely. And so thinking about that, realizing that sometimes we look at those grand people and think that we are less than, and we're not. We are just as deserving. We are equal to. And I think that Ernest Holmes was trying to point that out in these writings. He says, we look too far away for reality, capital R, reality. We look too far away when it's really right here at home. Our personal intelligence of infinite energy, or God, constitutes our receptivity to life. And this determines what it does as and through each one of us. It's personal to each one of us. So I invite you to think of a moment, and it could even be that meditation, because boy, I could feel the energy in the room. Think of a moment when you felt suspended in time. It felt like it was timeless. And you may have lots of moments. Go to one of them. No time, no space, simply you and whatever you were holding in your mind and on your heart. And in those moments, I would bet that every one of us would say, it just felt so peaceful. We stepped out of the busyness of being human and the activity that is guided by the clock and the time, and we stepped into that peaceful space that is always within us, awaiting our attention. We oftentimes also feel blissful in that experience. We wish it would last forever, and yet at the same time that we're wishing that, we're also understanding that something within us knows that it is forever. It is eternal, because it is reality. We are a part of that reality. We don't have to look far for it. We can look at a scene in nature, a newborn baby. So what is it for you? And you don't have to say it out loud, just think about it. Because that, whatever you think about, is where you want to keep your mind, so that what it does through you is all you want it to be. Everything that you could ever want. How much reality will you express in this one glorious life that you have? Ernest Holmes wrote, "The mechanical laws of nature are set and immutable, but the spontaneous recognition of these laws gives us the power to bring them into practical use in everyday life and experience." So what are you giving your power to? What are you recognizing in you, around you? What about those moments when you feel suspended and timeless? How are you utilizing those in your imagination to create more of them? How are you keeping those ideas front and center in your own mind? And let's get personal. Whatever use you are making of your thoughts and feelings is what it does and what it is doing as you. So how's that going? And if you're thinking to yourself, awesome, just stay right there and keep on keeping on. But if you're thinking, well, there is this one area that isn't really working quite as great as I would like it to, realize and remember that you have the power to make the change. As you have created the present moment's experiences, you have the option of keeping them or changing them. Holmes tells us to look to the mind for the answer to all our problems. Look within. And again, Sandy demonstrated that in her talk today. All we need to do is to make a conscious connection with infinite mind, place your idea of good into the mold of law, and then start seeing love all around you, through you, and as you and your experience. We accomplish our desired results as we state them and feel them. And that leads us to a place where our mind knows truth. Dr. Holmes wrote, "To it," meaning God, "all things are possible. To us, as much as possible as we can conceive according to law." We must also be ready to understand when we receive, to understand the consequences of our thought put into action. A great example of that we can relate to is winning the lottery. And they say that 70% of people go bankrupt within a few years. They say that that's because obtaining more money often leads to careless spending, a desire to simply get more, and greed and destruction not only to the person that won it, but to the families of these people. You have to have a plan in your imagination. You have to know your oneness and your power, and then you have to see yourself in that experience, living it out, living it through, allowing it to live through you. And so, as you know your plan, you have to be ready to keep your mind and your feelings on loving kindness, because God is the self-givingness of life to all of life. And that is what we are intended to pay forward.
One thing that was amazing to me reading through this chapter this week was the fact that he talks so much about simplicity and the idea that all we have to do is think, and that is it. It is always doing to us and for us and around us according to our thought processes. And we can have positive thoughts, we can have negative thoughts, and it's always responding to whatever thoughts those are. So if we have great thoughts of great things, we have great experiences because that's what God does for us as a result of our thinking. And if we have stinking thinking, we get stinking results. And so therefore we can change that to thinking thinking and create positive ideas in our mind. I believe that Ernest Holmes is emphasizing the simplicity of the creative process. And he says it over and over and over again. All you have to do is think positively. That's all. And that will create the belief system that will allow it to go through law and manifest in your lives. He says, there is no riddle of simplicity. I think that's a remarkable statement because actually those terms are contradictory. A riddle and a simplicity. And so we feel like we have to work on it, we have to solve something, we have to concentrate on it really hard to make things happen for us. And the truth is, all we have to do is simply think. Simply think. When you understand how law works and what it does, it's really a simple process. We simply and effortlessly partake of the divine nature when we are receptive of it. We hold the thought, and then we receive it. End of story. That's what God does. Ernest Holmes says, to return to the same simplicity is one of the first and most important things to do. And notice he says, sane simplicity. Once again, he's talking about rationalism and logic. Coming to a sane simplicity. Not worrying about it and fretting over it. He says that the divine incarnation is inherent in our nature. It's inherent in our nature. It's who we are. We don't have to change anything about us to be worthy of it, to receive. He says, let us do away with ponderosity of thought and approach the thing simply and quietly. Let us waste no further time looking for the secret of success or the key to happiness. Either there is no secret of success and key to happiness, or everything around us is the key to success and happiness. It is ours already. We simply have to hold that thought and receive it. Not just for that simple. God, responds to our thoughts. It does so immutably, and immediately. We create a mental mold, and the law fills that mold. Ernest Holmes says we should be very careful not to think that because you make the mold, we must create the substance. There is a universal substance all around us, of which we are, and it automatically accepts the mold that we put into the universe through our thoughts. When we buy a car, when we order a car, and we receive it, we don't expect to have to receive it in a big box, then put it all together and assemble it. We pretty much assume that it's going to come to us in the form of a car. But for some reason, when we pray, we ask the universe for stuff. We expect that we're going to have to do something for it. We're going to have to jump through hoops. We're going to have to do something or be worthy of it some way. We don't really have to work for our good from the universe. Source energy is malleable and subject to whatever parameters we design. We are not manipulating the system, we are participating with it. Ernest Holmes said, "It is the nature of thought and of the creative energy and of nature of being to be this way." That's simple. We're not making it happen. We are allowing God to work how it works and do what it does, and we are receptive, accepting the good that we co-create.
Absolutely, and we all use the same source energy. The source energy contains all that is, and so it doesn't ever run out. There's plenty. You can take whatever you want, and there's still plenty of that for others. The principles can be discovered through many different interests that we might have. Could be science, could be art, could be technology, maybe your spirituality, just life, everyday life. So I invite you to think again of a prisoner of war, and they are in probably some of the worst conditions. And one thinks of the horror of the situation, while the other thinks and focuses their attention and their imagination on returning home to family. They are each using that same source. They are each getting a different result in their own lives. Our mental work is definite. Our thought taps into principles. And because there is multiplicity in unity, there is variety. So as we use source, we must use it with faith. We must use it specifically and definitely in our thought and our purpose and the direction, and I would add the imagining of the plan afterwards. How are we living and feeling and being once we already have what it is we desire? And for some of us, we're doing that now. In Science of Mind, in this chapter, to paraphrase a little bit of it and kind of condense it together, law coexists with the eternal. Law is not separate from God or from the oneness and unity that is. It coexists with it. Infinite law and infinite intelligence are two sides of infinite unity that balance each other as they operate. One is the personal, the self-givingness, and the impersonal principle. And so I've given this out repeatedly, we've given this out repeatedly, and we're going to give it to you one more time because it is a quote from Ernest Holmes that is so incredibly powerful. I'm going to read it to you once, and then we're going to put it up here. And there is a yellow, bright yellow paper with it written on. So as you give when we tithe, you can take one of those papers home and make as many copies as you want. And here's what it says. Good and more good is mine. There is no limit to the good which is mine. Everywhere I go, I see good. I feel good. I experience it. It presses itself against me, flows through me, expresses itself as me, and multiplies around me. Let us share those words together.
Good
and more good is mine. There is no limit to the good that is mine. Everywhere I go, I see this good. I feel it. I experience it. It presses itself against me, flows through me, expresses itself as me, and multiplies itself around me.
And then we see it again, all over.